Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jessica. If this is your first time here, thank you for stopping by. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to cut and sew this lovely dress with collar. If it's what you love to learn, kindly watch till the end. And if you hate to subscribe, please hit on the subscribe button below and also turn on your notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. So without wasting much time, let's get started with this tutorial. These are the fabrics I'll be making use of. I have a light crepe fabric of 1.5 yards and the vintage fabric is also 1.5 yards. Starting off with the pattern drafting, from the tip of my pattern paper, I'll mark 1 inch downwards and square across. This is going to be my shoulder line, so I'll go ahead and label that shoulder. Placing my tape on the shoulder line, I'll mark 10 inches downwards for my bust line and 16 inches for my half length. Placing my tape on the half length, I'll mark 6 inches downwards as the full length. I'll square across these lines and label them as well. On the shoulder line, I'll mark half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. I'll also mark my neck width, which is 3.5 inches. At the point where the shoulder measurement ended, I'll come downwards by 1.5 inches from my shoulder slope and connect it to the neck width like so. Placing my tape on the 1.5 inches I came down by, I'm going to mark 7 inches downwards from my armhole level and connect with a straight line. At the point where the armhole level ended, I'll extend the line outwards and label that my chest line. I'll find the midpoint of this straight line. On that midpoint, I'll come in by ½ inch. I'll mark quarter of my bust circumference on the chest line, then use my curved ruler to connect from the shoulder slope to the ½ inch I came in by to quarter of my bust circumference on the chest line to form my armhole curve. On the chest line half length and full length, I'll come in by 4 inches from the center front, which is half of my nipple to nipple measurements, and connect with a straight line. At the half length, I'll mark ½ inch on both sides of that straight line and connect it on both sides upwards to the bust line and downwards to the full length. With my curved ruler, I'll connect from that straight line to the midpoint of my armhole curve like so. Afterwards, I'll start imputing part of my round body measurement. On the bust line, I will mark quarter of my bust circumference and add extra 1.5 inches sewing allowance. I'll also add sewing allowance of 1.5 inch on the chest line. And on the half length, I will mark quarter of my waist circumference and add my 1.5 inches sewing allowance. I'll also replace the 1 inch that I took on the half length, making the total allowance I'm adding on that half length 2.5 inches. And on the full length, I'll mark quarter of my waist circumference plus ½ inch, then add extra 1.5 inches sewing allowance. After that, I'll go ahead and connect these marks. Then for my basque waistline, I will mark 3.5 inches downwards from my full length and connect it with a curve to the full length line. For the neck depth, I will mark 7.5 inches downwards from my shoulder and connect it to the neck width. For my side bust dart, I will mark 2 inches downwards from my bust line and connect it to half of my nipple to nipple measurement I marked on the bust line. After which, I'll go ahead and cut it out. After cutting the front pattern, I'll close the side bust dart to get the crease line and slash it open. Then I will extend my dart line to the basque line like so. I'll go ahead and cut out the dart, then close my side bust dart. After cutting, I'll label the center front and side front. Now for the back pattern, I already have my shoulder line. So placing my tape on the shoulder line, I will mark 10 inches downwards from my bust line and 14 inches on my back half length. Okay, so our front half length is 14 inches while the back half length is 16 inches. The back half length is 14 inches. This is because our front half length, which is 16 inches minus the 2 inches we use for our side bust dart, is 14 inches. Okay, so that is basically the concept. Your half length minus whatever you used as your side bust dart, whether 1.5 inches or 2 inches, is what you are going to minus from the front half length to get your back half length. Placing my tape on the back half length, I will mark 6 inches downwards for the full length and square across. And I'm also going to mark ½ inch inwards from the center back for my zip allowance and connect with a straight line. I will also label these lines. On the shoulder line, I'll mark off of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches, and I'll also mark my neck width, which is 3.5 inches. At the point where the shoulder measurement stopped, I'm going to come down with my 1.5 inches from my shoulder slope and connect it to the neck width. Placing my tape on that 1.5 inches I came downwards by, I'll mark 7 inches downwards from my armhole level and connect with a straight line. At the point where the armhole level ended, I will extend the line and label that chest line. I will mark the midpoint of that straight line, and on that midpoint, I'll come in by 1/2 inch. Then on the chest line, I will mark part of my bust circumference. They use my curved ruler to connect from the shoulder slant to the 1/2 inch I came in by to part of my bust circumference on the chest line. For my darts, I will mark 4 inches inwards for my zip allowance on the bust line, half length and the full length, and connect with a straight line. On the half length, I'll come in by 1/2 inch on both sides of that straight line and connect it upwards to the bust line and downwards to the full length on both sides. I'll also connect from the midpoint of my armhole curve to that straight line. I will impute quarter of my round body measurement on the bust line, waistline, and the full length. And I'm going to add my sewing allowance of 1.5 inches. Afterwards, I'll connect the marks. At the zip allowance, I'll come in by 1/2 inch on the half length and connect it upwards to the shoulder line and downwards to the full length. For my back neck depth, I will mark 3 inches downwards from my shoulder and connect it to the neck width. Now for this back neck depth, you can do whatever type of neckline you want. You can make it round or V, depends on what you want, okay? Placing my tape on the full length, I'll come downwards by 3 inches for my basque line, and from that 3 inches, I'll connect it to the full length, and I'll extend the dart line to that basque line, then go ahead and cut this out. Now for my sleeve, I'm going to place my tape on the tip of my pattern paper, and I'm going to mark my full length plus 1 inch, which is 10 inches. I'll square across, and I'll also mark 4.5 inches downwards for my bicep line and square across. I will measure the armhole of one of my patterns. What I got is 9 inches, so I'm going to mark 9 inches on my biceps line and connect it with a slanted line like so to the tip of my pattern. I will mark the midpoint of that slanted line, and with my curved ruler, I'll connect from the tip of my pattern to that to the center of the slanted line, and from the center of the slanted line to the measurement I marked on my biceps line. I'll cut it out, then retake the measurement to make sure that it is still 9 inches. So what I got is 10 inches, so I had to reduce it to 9 inches. At the full length, I'll mark half of my round sleeve measurement and add extra 1.5 inches sewing allowance, then connect it to my biceps line and cut it out. What I'm going to do now is to cut this pattern piece on my fabric. So to do that, I'm going ahead to fold my fabric into 2 and place my pattern on it, as you can see. So I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to add 1/2 inch at the center for joining. I'll also add 1/2 inch at the shoulder for joining and on the neckline for turning. So I'll do this off camera and be back. Now for my collar, I'm going to place the shoulder of my front and back pattern together. Then use my masking tape to hold it. I'm also going to join the side front pattern and the center front pattern together. I'll place another pattern paper underneath to close the space between the center front and the side front. Then use my masking tape to hold it down. First, I'm going to place my tape at the bust line, and I'll mark 2.5 inches downwards and square across. Placing my tape on that 2.5 inches line that I've just ruled, I will mark 4 inches inwards from my center front. With a slightly curved line, I'll connect from my neck depth to that 4 inches I marked. I will also connect from my shoulder to that 4 inches line with a slightly curved line. So the two lines are going to meet at that 4 inches mark. For the back collar, I will mark 3 inches downwards from my back neck depth and square across. Placing my tape on that 3 inches line I marked downwards, I will mark 2 inches inwards from my zip allowance and connect it to my back neck depth like so. Just like what we did for the front, for my shoulder I will connect to the 2 inches I came inwards by. I'm going to trace it out now. To do that, I'll place another pattern paper underneath. The pattern paper you are placing, make sure that it will be enough to cover the front and back collar, okay? I'll pin the patterns together, then use my tracing wheel to trace out the collar. After tracing, I'll remove my pattern and I'm going to add 1/2 inch on all the sides of this collar pattern. Okay, I'm going to add 1/2 inch. This 1/2 inch is for turning with my lining. So go ahead and add your 1/2 inch on all the sides of this collar pattern, so that when you are cutting on your fabric, you won't need to add any allowance again. Please label your pattern, okay? Label your collar pattern so that you will not be confused. Label it in such a way that you understand the sides where each side is supposed to be. After cutting out this collar pattern, I'm going to cut it on my fabric on fold. I'm going to be cutting it 2 times on my fabric on fold. After cutting it, I'm going to be having 4 pieces. 2 will be the lining and 2 will be the main fabric. Now for the bottom part of this dress, that is the plain fabric I'll be using to do the gathers. It is going to be a long piece of fabric that will fold at the hem and that will gather at the top. So this is me folding my entire fabric to cut the length, okay? The width does not have to be any specific measurement because it's gathers. I'm folding the fabric I have here. So after folding it this way, I am going to impute my length. So what I'm marking here is 20 inches, okay? I minused the length of the upper part from my full gown length and I got 18 inches. So I added extra 2 inches for folding at the down part and for joining at the upper part. So after marking these 20 inches, I'll go ahead and cut this out. So I was done cutting my patterns on my fabric. What I'm going to do now is to join these pieces together. So this is the collar. This is me cutting the collar on my fabric. Like I said, I'm going to be cutting this collar on my fabric on fold. I'm going to be cutting it 2 times on my fabric on fold. What I'm going to do now is to join all my fabric pieces together. So this is the center back and the side back. I'm going to join them front facing front using 1/2 inch. I'll do the same for the front piece. And this is my collar piece, okay? I'm going to take 2 pieces each and join them on all sides except the upper part, okay? The upper part is where I'm going to be attaching to the neckline of my dress, so I'm not going to be joining that side. And for my sleeves, I'm going to double fold the bottom part. I was done joining all that. What I'm going to do now is to open press the seams. All the 1/2 inch seam allowance I joined, I'm going to open press them to flatten it on the front and on the wrong side. And for the collar, I'm going to trim this 1/2 inch allowance I added. It's either you trim or you notch the 1/2 inch. Okay, I'm going to trim it before turning it to the right side to iron it. I was done ironing. What I'm going to do now is to join the shoulders of the front and the back piece, and I'm also going to join the shoulders of the facing. So you join the shoulders of the front and back main fabric separate, and you join that of the facing separate. After joining the shoulders of the main fabric, I'm going to attach my sleeve. I was done joining the shoulders of the main fabric. What I'm going to do now is to attach the collar to the neckline of the main fabric. I'm going to place the collar on the neckline of my dress, starting from the center front. I'm going to pin it down to the center back. You can see the way I am aligning the neckline of the fabric to that of the collar. That is how you are going to do yours, and you're going to pin it down. So I'm going to also do the same for the other collar. Before you sew, make sure you pin. Before you join this collar, make sure you pin the collar to the neckline of your dress. It's very important. Okay, make sure you pin, and the collar, the neckline of the collar should align with the neckline of the dress. I was done joining the collar, and this is what it looks like. I really love the outcome. So what I'm going to do now is to turn the neckline with my facing. Okay, I'm going to turn the neckline with my facing. So to do that, I'm going to place the facing facing front with the right side of the main fabric, and I'm going to join the two necklines using 1/2 inch. So I'll pin it down before joining the neckline. I was done joining the facing. What I'm going to do now is to trim off the 1/2 inch seam allowance I used in joining and turn the facing to the wrong side and iron. I will give it a good ironing with my hemming gum so that it will relax very well. I was done ironing. This is the right side and this is the wrong side. You can see how neat it came out. What I'm going to do now is to join the two sides of the front and back. So I'll turn it to the wrong side, and I'm going to pin from the sleeve to the full length of the two sides. I'll make sure that it is equal on both sides. After pinning down, I'm going to mark 1.5 inch from the sleeve to the full length, because this is the allowance we added while drafting. Okay, after marking, I'll go over to my machine and I'll join the two sides. I was done joining the two sides, as you can see. So what I'm going to do now is to gather this plain fabric I'll be attaching to the bottom part. Okay, so I'm gonna head to fold the down part of this plain fabric. What I'm going to do now is to make gather stitches at the upper part. I was done gathering the upper part of this plain fabric. What I'm going to do now is to attach it to the bottom part of this of the upper part of this dress. I was done joining. What I'm going to do now is to close the zip side and attach my zip. I'm going to pin the zip side and I'll mark where my zip will stop. My zip will stop at 7 inches downwards from my waistline. That is my half length. That is where my zip will stop. So I'm going to mark that. The remaining part of the zip allowance, I'm going to close it using 1 inch. I was done attaching the zip, and this is the final look of this dress. It really came out beautiful and I love it. So if you find this video helpful, please like, drop a comment and subscribe, and do not forget to turn on your notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Thanks for watching, and see you guys in my next tutorial.